It's hard to keep up with all the new taxes being proposed by the People's Republic of California, but today I'm going to share with you the latest 3 and tell you how to avoid them. And indeed, it is really hard to keep up with all the new taxes. I mean, it's bad enough what they're trying to do in the US and in the Western world in general. California is bar none the worst. And if you've watched our stuff before, you know my opinion. You shouldn't be living in California, and if you're going to move, you might as well move. Don't go to Texas, don't go to Florida. If you got to keep it in the United States, you can go to Puerto Rico. Otherwise, you might as well treat the world as your oyster. We're seeing more Californians than ever moving to Mexico. The tide is now reversed, and what I've been saying since 2015 is now coming true. Consider going to Mexico. Consider going to somewhere else in Latin America. Consider going to Western Europe. Consider going to Asia. If you can move out of California to escape the never-ending litany of new taxes being proposed, you might as well find a place where you can go where you're treated best and reduce your tax rate to as low as 0. Yes, even as an American. If it's your first time here, my name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally reduce your taxes, diversify and protect your assets, get second citizenship to protect your freedom, and just generally take advantage of the competitive environment where you, as someone with success, can get a better deal than what you're getting right now, because we all want competition. I also host the biggest and best offshore conference called Nomad Capitalist Live. So I've got 3 things to share with you today about 3 new taxes. There's a stamp duty, there's an income tax increase because you're not paying enough in California already, and there's a wealth tax. These things are all basically coming up this year. Let's start with number 1. This is the stamp duty, and I always love when people are pitching new taxes where it's like, hey, you can afford it, right? I mean, as long as you can afford it, let's just reach in and grab whatever you can. As long as they can afford it, that's okay. From inequality.org, tax the rich, house the homeless. In LA, 1%ers, that's what you nasty, greedy pigs, currently pay less than a 1% city tax on the mansions they make millions selling. So this is the best argument, and this is all you need to tell, by the way. Saw a comment on social media from a client of ours the other day. He said, he was commenting about some of this kind of stuff. He said, I've been in Eastern Europe for a bunch of months. He said, okay, I don't speak the language, but I'm talking to folks. I don't hear any of this stuff where it's like they pay less than 1% city tax. The devil's in the details there, right? City tax, is there a state tax? Is there a federal tax? Like, there's not, but like the way they word it is pretty, like they're trying to sell you on something. They pay less than 1%. Do you know what I pay when I sell my properties in terms of what they're asking for? 0. If I sell a property, it's 0, right? So they pay less than 1%. It's designed to basically make people feel bad. 1%ers pay less than 1%. The pitch is just because they don't like you, they want you to pay more. And so the idea is basically that because Los Angeles has smog, this is inequality.org, Los Angeles has smog, and yet if you live in a nice neighborhood, you're not suffering from smog. But if you live in a bad neighborhood, you are suffering from smog. And so how are we going to fix that? Well, on the citywide ballot this November is a landmark new tax on the rich that would kick in every time a local mansion changes hands. Now, I'd like to know their definition of mansion, by the way. Of course, that could also be subject to a lot of manipulation because, again, they just hate you. They're going to do whatever it takes to make sure they get their hands in your pockets, because even liberals right now in California are complaining and pushing back on the fact that it costs almost $800,000 to build a single housing unit for the homeless. France isn't that inefficient. Spain isn't that efficient. It's utter and complete graft, and these people need your money, and they will use every shame and manipulation tactic to the public. Oh, they're paying less than 1% city tax, as if that means anything, because they want your money to keep grafting off of you. All the proceeds from this new tax on mansions, okay, here we go, $5 million or more. Is that a mansion in today's inflationary environment? I'd like to see these mansions in Beverly Hills for $5 million. Will go to creating safe and secure housing opportunities for LA families of limited financial means, of course, as long as you can pitch it that way. No one knows exactly how much the new city ordinance will raise if passed. Oh, it's unbelievable. But the new take from the tax figures will be substantial. Well, as long as it's substantial, at least they have that much figured out. The grassroots coalition behind the initiative, Unite to House LA, has estimated that it has its proposed tax measure been in effect over the last year, the city would have made $800 million in new revenue. Here's the issue, guys. And this is why I've always advocated for smaller countries. I'm not saying every small country is perfect or that every big country is terrible. But, in small countries, when you know people, and we interviewed former Georgian President Saakashvili, and he said, Georgia was almost too small, because like you would lay off a bunch of government workers, and then you would see them like at the cafes, and they would like, you'd have to like, deal with that. But you have to make tough choices, right? And so you can't really insulate yourself from that. And so when you're in a small political environment, you have to make decisions that like actually help people and actually resonate. And so whether even if you don't like the government, you have to admit, like, when the government's more accountable, that's a better government. And so when it costs $800,000 to build one unit of housing for the homeless, and everybody's just kind of sucking the government dry and taking their share, how much money you raise is pretty much irrelevant. And so at least if you were in, one thing that people tell us, we have people who are relatively liberal who hire us, and they say, I don't mind paying. I just don't want it to be wasted. I want the homeless to actually have a place to live. I want people to actually be safe. I want people to actually have health care. I want people to actually have freedoms. And you know what? Whether we agree or disagree, that makes some sense. These people want to keep raising your taxes, but they never solve the core issue. I run a business. I'm always telling people on my team, why don't we get to the core issue? What's the actual issue? Sometimes people talk about window dressing. What's the core issue? The core issue here is the government gets money and they waste it. And a bunch of people don't seem to mind because they're all getting their share. And therefore, the homeless don't get their housing because it could be done for 1/8 the cost, but then it'll be your fault that they wasted the money. And so you're going to have to pay more, and they'll have a never-ending number of taxes. And next year it won't be, oh my God, I can't believe they're only paying 1%. Next year it'll be, I can't believe they're paying 3%. So with all that revenue, the House LA initiative in place would come from adding a new 4% city tax on the sale or transfer of properties between $5 and $10 million, and $5.5 million levy on the transfer of properties for over $10 million. The current city tax on these luxury transfers, dun, 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 just 0.45%. The humanity that you made money in California, that you paid gazillions of dollars in income tax, that you paid to smog check your car every 3 weeks, all the hassles, all the inconveniences, all the frustration, all the crap. And then you finally scrounged and saved your way to $5 million. The inflationary environment and everything happening, now your house is worth $10 million and you sell it and you merely kicked in, what is that? You merely kicked in a couple of $100,000. Shame on you. Over the last 2 years, data from the real estate site Redfin show more than 1,000 single-family homes sold for over $5 million. Maybe there's a reason for that. Even if people live in LA, by the way. And anyway, it prattles on and on and on about how you're not paying enough tax, and they're going to spend this to build money. Listen, the goals are admirable, but the execution is terrible, and they don't want to fix the execution to actually get the goal. The goal being accomplished, by the way, if there were no homeless people, what would inequality.org do? Like, I'd be happy. They'd be miserable. It'd be the worst day of their lives. They'd have nothing to complain about anymore. They'd have to find some other way to pick your pocket. So that's the first thing. You own a house in Los Angeles. They want to basically 10x to 14 or 15x your tax when you sell that house. And by the way, they don't understand, like, we live in an inflationary environment. I think prices of housing in California, for many factors, are not just going to be stratospheric forever, but they don't understand, like, hey, like, the dollar is worth less and like all these things. They just know, like, hey, we don't have money and you do, and that makes us angry. Now, the second thing is California income tax. Again, another good cause, right? There's always a good cause. California to raise income taxes to fund the Clean Cars and Clean Air Act. You think with all the money, I mean, it's like the 6th largest economy in the world. They got a lot of money. They've been running like budget surpluses. You think they could have like fixed the air, but somehow it's just you rich jerks are really, if it weren't for you rich jerks, we'd have all of our problems solved by now. Here's the article from movement.net. This is We Are the Movement. California has planned to raise the income taxes of its wealthiest residents. It's Tuesday. People that are earning over $2 million a year will be taxed so that the money can be used towards increased electric vehicle rebates, more charging stations, and many other clean air. I thought that the leftists in California didn't like Elon Musk anymore. Now they're going to give him more of your money. But I guess they're going to pick at their part before it gets over to his way. The Clean Cars and Clean Air Act, if approved by a majority of voters, which and the People's Republic, I'm sure, won't be a challenge, would generate $3 to $4.5 billion annually. I also like, by the way, as if anyone reading these articles knows what $3 to $4.5 billion is, like as if they know the difference. Like, oh yeah, with $3 billion, we can make a sustainable, like nobody knows. It's just designed to be like, oh, that feels good. That's a lot of money for electric cars. And those rich jerks don't need it. The measure was solidified on Wednesday when this was written by Secretary of State Shirley Weber after she confirmed that its supporters turned in signatures of more than 623,212 registered voter. So at least we know 623,000 of your fellow Californians want you to pay more because you're just a terrible person. If passed, the measure would increase state income taxes by 1.75% on income above $2 million for up to 20 years. And then will be renewed after that. I'll fix it for them. It'll never go away, of course. California's top income tax rate is 13.3%. Therefore, it will be increased to 15.05%. Let me tell you, by the way, that's on top of your federal taxes. That's on top of all your Social Security contributions. I'm sitting in a country, and it's not a rarity, by the way. I'm sitting in a country where your entire tax burden is less than California's tax burden now. You can make as much money as you want. 13.3% just for the local, and now they want to go to 15.05. Have you noticed how many times this California, they love increase? When's it going to be 20%? How about 50%? And you can't even fully deduct it anymore, right? The act is supported by numerous environmental and public health groups, of course. Listen, that's great when everybody keeps leaving California. How many people have left in the last 2 years? Like 500,000 people. That's great. One more thing. If that's not enough to try. So if a big new tax on your house, right? By the way, they don't really care if you make a profit on the house. They just want to like, that's your problem. They just want to like take a levy. Then they're going to increase your income tax rates after didn't they just increase them? It's hard to keep up with. Now they also are going to be voting on a wealth tax and sports betting. But Californians will decide this November whether to tax millionaires to boost electric vehicle ownership. The wealth tax will appear on the November 8th ballot alongside proposals to allow sports betting in the state for the first time. And it goes on and on and on. You're not going to increase the minimum wage. So yeah, now a wealth tax so you're going to pay more in income, you're going to pay more when you sell an asset, and you're going to pay just to hold assets or have wealth or have cash in the bank. So wealth tax, higher income tax, higher tax when you sell your house if you live in Los Angeles. On top of that, remember California wanted to have a retroactive tax where they just went back and said, you used to live here. So here's my suggestion if you're still living in California. How about you do yourself a favor and pack those bags? And again, you want to move to Texas? I won't judge you. But if you're going to take the chance to move, you're taking the kids out of school, you're putting stuff in the van, you're doing everything, why don't you go somewhere where you can really go where you're treated best? Because you think all the Californians moving to Florida and Texas and Idaho, you think they're not going to change the makeup of those states and make those states get worse? I lived in Arizona for years. There was an income tax, but it was relatively nominal. Now they doubled it on $250,000 or more. You think that's partially because people from other states moved in and said, hey, why aren't we paying more? So now Arizona is pretty uncompetitive. So people talk about the nomad capitalist approach of moving to another country and enjoying it while you can. And hey, listen, every 20 or 50 or 100 or 200 years, a country may go out of vogue. And they say, well, what, are you going to keep running? Well, you're going to keep running from California to Arizona to Texas, or no, to Florida, and then Florida, they're gonna turn blue, and then you're going to go to Texas, and then there's going to be nowhere else to go. And they're going to be like, oh, this sucks. And so why not make one move to a place that gives everything you need? We've talked before in episodes about places with California climate. There's plenty of places in the world with California climate. You can work towards a second passport. By the way, if you like the California sense of kind of like social libertarianism or social liberalism, fine, go to Europe. There's places with California climate in Europe that have more of that you're looking for. I don't judge. Whatever you're looking for, there's a place that offers it. And so these tax increases are going to crush you. And so if you're going up against a business that's structured like mine, where your tax burden is 872%, and mine is 1%, how is that going to be a level playing field for you to compete? If you're making investments, like how is that going to be a level playing field for you to compete and grow your business, grow your portfolio, create generational wealth? You just can't do it in California. They don't want people like you. Everything I read in California is, we don't want people creating generational wealth. A rich family had a wedding and there was an article criticizing it. That like, this is what privilege looks like. That like a rich family, their daughter got married and it's a travesty. You want to live in that environment? You probably don't. You think Florida's that much better? You think the people there are like that much different? No. You want to find a place where they're truly respecting, perhaps because they're a small country, or they realize where their bread is buttered, or they realize like, oh, hey, this guy's making lots of money. Like, we'd like to have that person here, bring their money here. There are countries that will welcome you. Go there, get a second residence, work towards your second passport, so if times get really tough, you've got an escape plan from the US in general, because they're the other half of the problem. Move some of your assets overseas legally. Do everything legally. Fill all the forms you have to. And go where you're treated best. Don't go where you're treated better. Go where you're treated best. But for sure, you got to get out of California.